It's so unfair. Why does this always happen to me? Haven't I suffered enough? I deserve something for all I've been through. If they could only see my pain, they'd finally understand. They'd regret every slight. And when they do, they'll beg for forgiveness. But I'll rise above it and rule with compassion. They'll adore me and grieve for what I've endured. Do these thoughts sound familiar? There's something moving in the shadows. Do you feel it too? A wound that was never healed, whispering beneath the surface. It cloaks itself in virtue, in mercy, even in tenderness. But if you look closely, you see the hunger behind the smile. It's revenge masquerading as fairness. You're watching Archetypal Wisdom. Join me in exploring the symbolic truths and mysteries of humankind. Remember to like and subscribe. Now, back to the video. Let me tell you a story. There was a kingdom ruled by a tyrant. He could not lead his people. He only used them. He abused them with his words and manipulated them with his gaze. The people lived in fear, until one among them rose. A townswoman with fire in her voice cried out, "No more!" The people rallied, and the tyrant was overthrown. She was crowned his successor, and deemed the savior of the people. She swore to erase every trace of the old order. Her eyes burned with righteousness. Her will was magnificent and unbending. She was fierce, but what made her different from the tyrant was that she had suffered. In her attempt to wipe out the prior order, she became stricter with the townspeople. Over time, that strictness became militant, and her followers started to hesitate. She took great offense to this. When they questioned her, she struck them down. To her, hesitation was betrayal, doubt was treason, and slowly, without realizing it, she became the very tyrant she once rose up to defeat. What do we do when the pain we've carried doesn't heal, but instead spills out onto the world around us? What happens when suffering becomes the only thing we can see, and the people around us are reduced to being either on our side or against us, ally or adversary? What we are looking at here is the tragedy of covert narcissism. So what exactly is covert narcissism? At its core, it carries the same traits as narcissistic personality disorder: grandiosity, entitlement, a hunger for admiration, lack of empathy, and exploitation. Unlike the grandiose narcissist who boasts loudly, the covert narcissist controls through whisperings of their vulnerability. Their wound becomes their crown. On the surface, they may seem gentle, vulnerable, even morally righteous. Yet this kind exterior is a carefully crafted false self. And the vulnerability in their story? That's the hook. It draws out sympathy. And sympathy in their hands becomes a powerful form of control. Guilt is a powerful resource. But the tragedy here is that they were once a victim. They did actually suffer. They will have gone through some form of neglect or abuse, which in turn left a fracture in the psyche. In order to protect themselves, they became inflated quietly. A grandiose vision of themselves was born to compensate for the pain and feelings of hopelessness. They become heavily identified with their suffering. The world owes them. In other words, they truly believe the story of their own plight because there are real feelings of pain inside. It's this belief in their own eternal victimization that justifies their need for approval and special treatment, as well as the rationalizing of their mistreatment of others. The danger here is that they are able to weave very compelling narratives designed to incite guilt in order to get their desires met, which are centered around lifting themselves up and getting special treatment. Again, this isn't to say their pain isn't real, that they haven't been legitimately victimized, but their pain has become a pathology. Therefore, a covert narcissist will be very adept at manipulating the human virtue of compassion. What is most scary is that they themselves believe they are owed this, making their story all the more compelling. With this natural skill, they will be able to capitalize on any opportunity which can produce sympathy, whether that is an individual situation or a situation within the broader community and society at large. So what is the solution? Well, psychology is not just modern diagnosis. It is ancient and primal instinct. We've seen this figure before, thousands of years ago. The eternal child, the Puer Aeternus, a Latin term meaning eternal boy. In ancient Roman poetry and religion, the term was used to describe youthful gods who never age, die young, or live forever in a youthful state. Jung and post-Jungians used the term to describe a psychological archetype. This archetype describes individuals who remain bound to childlike states, brilliant, imaginative, idealistic, but resistant to limitation and maturity. There are many ancient myths that point to this archetype, such as Icarus, the boy who ignored his father's warnings and flew too close to the sun, causing his wax wings to melt, resulting in his tragic fall. A modern example would be Peter Pan, the boy who never grew up and remained in fantasy. As with all archetypes, they represent psychological instincts and have a positive and negative pole. The positive pole of the Puer is vitality, openness, and creativity. The negative pole is refusal to grow, inability to bear limitation, fragility masked by fantasy and inflation. Sound familiar? You see, the great power of understanding archetypes is understanding the collective wisdom of humanity across millennia, encoded into these archetypal patterns. The covert narcissist displays the negative pole of the Puer archetype. In their wounding, they have been frozen in a childlike capacity in their ability to regulate themselves and connect with others. Their true wounding is concealed and compensated with internal grandiosity and a sense of entitlement that everyone should take care of them. In essence, they are stuck in arrested development. So what do the tales of this archetype inform us about accessing the positive pole? Well, the common theme is radical acceptance of the wound. We see this in many stories. For example, the parable of the prodigal son. A young man demands his inheritance early. He cannot bear to wait, to endure limitations. With his newfound wealth, he flees into indulgence and fantasy, wasting everything on reckless pleasures. This is the negative pole of the Puer, escaping responsibility, intoxicated by freedom, convinced the world owes him more. But soon the fantasy collapses. His wealth is gone and he finds himself starving, feeding pigs while longing for their food. Here, the escape leads him not to freedom, but to humiliation, suffering, and symbolic death. The child who refused limitation is brought hurtling back down to earth. And it is in that place of death that transformation begins. In his humility, he resolves to return home, no longer demanding, no longer entitled, but willing to live even as a servant. To his surprise, his father embraces him, and he is restored not through his grandiosity, but through his surrender. Here we see the ancient outline of covert narcissism and its solution. The wounded child flees into fantasy, demanding the world compensate them, but the fantasy always collapses, and the escape ends in emptiness. Only by descending into the wound, accepting limitation, and humbling oneself does the Puer transform. In that humility lies the path to vitality, openness, and true creativity. For the covert narcissist, the forever child is trapped in the psyche, wounded and unintegrated. A legitimate wound which has gone untreated and morphed into a moral false self, using guilt to control and manipulate the world to fulfill an inflated sense of owed compensation. The ancient wisdom tells us that it is only through descending into the wound and truly feeling all of the pain that couldn't be felt before that a person can heal. In confronting the pain fully, the false compensatory self dies and the Puer is properly integrated, allowing access to the life-giving, creative, and open spirit as opposed to the life-taking avoidance and inflation. It seems that the very thing that has been lurking in the shadows all around us was within us the whole time. Every time we refuse to feel our pain, something dangerous begins to form around it, a pathology built on avoidance. And when that happens, the psyche seeks balance in its own way, through an antiadromia, the reversal of opposites. In plain terms, what we fight hardest against, we eventually become. The tyrant we hate, the abuser we fear, the oppressor we despise, if we do not heal, their shadow finds a home within us. You've been watching Archetypal Wisdom. Remember to like and subscribe. Stay wise.